And if we look then at this mediascape, I can come off as an optimist, but I do want to say that this is not the answer. There's actually a number of challenges in this new mediascape. And while this is the environment in which the answer has to be formulated, we also have to be aware of the challenges. And I'll just go through a few of them briefly here that I think maybe should be discussed in other contexts. We can discuss them tomorrow as well. One of them is ambient attention, just the fact that our students are sort of ambiently aware of where all their friends are at all times through their text messaging and so on. So they're not fully with you when they're in the classroom necessarily. You know, there's other things going on. There's also this problem of information overchoice. This term is very, very old. This is Alvin Toffler's term. So it's almost 40 years old. And because there was already sort of an information overload 40 years ago. And today it's even worse. And the problem comes from like trying to figure out what you're supposed to pay attention to. And so students and professors alike can end up just sort of surfing along the surfaces of things, like literally surfing on the surface, which means we're not getting into any depth, and that can be a real danger. And then finally, these things add up to attention scarcity. That is that there's too much to pay attention to, and therefore the scarce resource becomes attention itself. Now, what then is the solution? I've got a real simple formula for this that I can go into in more detail tomorrow. But my simple solution is just to engage real problems, and we can do this in multiple ways, which I'll explain briefly. We do it with students, and if I can just pause here for a second to show you what I mean by this. When you transform your classroom and start thinking about working with the students instead of talking at them and not just like unloading information on them, but actually working with them, a remarkable thing happens. And it comes about, for me, from meditating on this idea that nobody is as smart as everybody. And I started thinking about who the smartest person in the room is here. And I know that I'm the smartest one in the field of anthropology in this room, and that's what I'm teaching, right? And so, therefore, I should be like the expert. But there's another way of looking at this, and that is comparing me versus we. So on the left is me, and on the right is we. And so on the left, there's me, and I'm about 33 years old. And so I've got 33 years of life experience and so on. If you look over on the right, that's the we. And the we over there has about 4,000 years of life experience. So it's 33 versus 4,000. There's no contest. On the left, I've got over 200 hours of college credit, which is a lot. It's more than anybody else in the room. But collectively, we have about 12,000 hours of college credit. And we actually have enough credits to qualify for every major at the university. So we have all the majors represented there. On the left, being an anthropology class, it's kind of important that you've traveled a lot and you've lived in different places. So I've lived for different lengths of time in 10 different countries for several years. But on the right, we have a collection of people, like together we have lived in over 50 countries for over 100 years. And we even have over 25 years of combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have almost as much time spent protesting those wars. We've built homes for impoverished people in Guatemala, for tornado-ravaged towns in Kansas. We helped in the Katrina effort. We collectively, we campaigned vigorously for Obama as well as John McCain. So collectively, the we is this really rich and complicated consciousness. And if only somehow we can harness that consciousness, that's really the most sophisticated and interesting entity in the room is the we, not just the me. So that then became my challenge. And you'll see tomorrow, if you want to come to my sort of experiments in education talk, I'll talk about my experiments in trying to harness that intelligence. And then finally, the third part of this, so the first part was engaging real problems. The second one is doing it with students. The third one is recognizing and harnessing the existing media environment. And you can see that it's the third place thing. It's not, so this isn't focused on technology. It's actually sort of the third part of this. And we do this not because students are really engaged in the technology, but so students themselves can recognize and harness the technology. Because it turns out that students are really good at entertaining themselves with technology, but they're almost completely lost in how these technologies can actually be effective and help them understand the world. Like they're not especially knowledge able. Like we we are still like the expert learners in the room. And somehow we need to bring our expertise in learning to this new media and help the students learn how to learn within this new mediascape. Because, a lot of the students are using new media in this way, which is actually obviously counterproductive to the learning process. And this is actually stating something else that I think is important, and that is that not just that they're Facebooking through their classes, but there's a subtext here, and that subtext is that these walls don't matter. Because of this something in the air, that something in the air is crossing all walls and all boundaries and actually connecting us outside of these walls, which means then that we can actually think about learning beyond walls. And I know this sounds cliche and cheesy to say like beyond walls, but it helps me just as a simple little thing when I start a class is to think about what it really means when the walls are down. Like, what does it mean when we can start a class and recognize that I can connect with anybody on the planet at any moment? Even in the middle of a lecture, I can Skype somebody in India if that seems appropriate for the lecture. And so just to think about what it means to go beyond walls in terms of research, just the recognition that there's almost the entire body of human knowledge is floating in the air all around us, in terms of collaboration, in terms of all these new ways that we can collaborate together, and then also in terms of publishing, the fact that anybody in the room can actually, and your students as well, can publish to possibly 1.4 billion people on the planet, as well as anybody in the future who gets online.